All right, now that we've applied some ringing out EQ, let's go ahead and move on to multiband dynamics. I'm going to turn the glue compressor off, and then I'm going to walk you through how to really properly dial in the MBD device. This guy is really sweet, really powerful. The way it usually starts is you want to solo each of the 3 bands. This is 3 different compressors in parallel, one just for the lows, one for the highs, and one for the mid-range. These little sliders here are going to adjust the frequency band for cutoff. So if I soloed this, I'm only hearing the frequencies above 2.5K and so on. So let's adjust this. I want to get as much information in the highs and lows to kind of narrow in on the mids, basically separate my instruments to the best of my ability. So I'm going to solo this band and adjust this until I can just hear the kind of shimmer and not any of the body of any of the sounds. Sometimes I'll listen for the snare drum, and I really don't want to hear too much snare in this thing at all, other than maybe just some shimmery shimmers. So that's cool. Now let's do the lows. Also listening for the snare, for instance. I'll bring this up, but make sure I don't hear the crack of that snare or the body. That's nice. Now here you should have no subs and no shimmer. Cool. So that's the first step. The next step, we'll be able to look at each of these bands and decide which of them is the most dynamic and if it needs any compression. Usually the one that's moving around the most is going to be the first one you address, and you can tell we're in RMS mode because this is turned on. So we're just looking at the averages, which makes the most sense at this stage. Decent amount of dynamics across the board. Let's start with the highs. So in order to compress the highs, this is my threshold right now. I'm going to grab this and I'm going to pull it down to where I'm just kind of tickling those tops, keeping in mind this is my RMS compressor. And now I can click in the middle and just pull down. I'm clicking here and vertically pulling down. And you'll notice these little horizontal lines are getting closer together. What's happening there is that what was 10 dB, the vertical lines here, vertical, are 10 decibels apart. And as they get closer and closer together by clicking here and pulling down, we're actually decreasing the amount of dynamics above the threshold. This is kind of a cool way to look at compression. So now that I've done that, and it kind of sounds still pretty cool, I can see at best I'm doing 10 dB of gain reduction there. So now I'd go to this output gain and turn this up to around 10. Now before I do too much of this, I'm going to take it out of solo to hear it all together and adjust this to taste, but I'm shooting for around 10. Nice. Let's do the mids. Pull this down. Just hitting those little, grazing those tops, and now let's add a little compression by pulling down in the middle. Go a little lower. Look, now I'm cutting off about 5. Let's take it out of solo and re-bias up our whole level to balance it up to around -5, or +5, pardon me. Again, I'm just adjusting this to taste, approximately going around this number. Awesome, so that's sounding pretty good. Let's A/B that. Wow. So much presence is gained in that multiband dynamic stage. It's always kind of shocking, even to me. I've done this a million times. Now let's solo the bass and do the same thing. We want to be really careful to not compress the bass too much, but I'm going to listen, and I'm also going to cover some of these upwards parameters here for the bass. This might be fun, so I'm going to look. I'm going to see where that compression should be. Usually, again, the threshold should just be tickling the tops, making sure that when the signal gets quiet, it definitely goes below the threshold. And now I can add some compression here. You can see the little VU meters start to separate. That's indicating how much gain reduction there is. Here's about 3. And again, I won't balance it out till I take it out of solo, of course. So another thing you can do with the bass and with any of these frequencies is you can apply upwards compression or expansion. So if I bring this up like this and I evoke compression down here, it's essentially going to keep the bass this loud. So if I do like heavy compression, which is upwards in this case, it's pushing that sub bass up. In other words, not letting the sub bass get quieter than this. This is like the OTT setting. You've seen those OTT presets, I'm sure, especially if you're into the EDM stuff or making shit super duper loud. Upwards compression is really cool. Another thing that's really tight you can do with this device that I really like, especially if I'm doing some, say the original mix engineer, me or someone else, over-compressed the bass, you can actually reverse this and see how if I pull down now, I'm actually expanding the vertical lines so they're further apart. That's going to re-add some bounce to my bass. So whenever the bass in this case turns down quieter than the threshold, it's going to push it down and out of the way, kind of like a gate does. Let's listen to that. Now that's adding dynamics to the quiet parts of the sound. Now in this case with my ears, I kind of want to upwards compress, so I'm going to give this some compression. Let's listen to that all together. Now that feels pretty good. Let's A/B it. Here's what it sounded like before. Ooh. Fun thing you can do with multiband dynamics too is there's a scale here, an amount for all the ratios. So if you turn this down, it's just like turning it off, and you can do more or less. Sometimes I'll end up kind of overdoing it a touch, and I'll pull this back just a little bit to get a little more into the kind of sexy dynamics state. What'll happen is if it's too loud, when you turn it up loud, it's going to hurt your ears. And so this again is a chance to go back and do more ringing out if you wanted. Let's try that. Honestly, that all sounds pretty fucking good to me. Might add a little bit more compression to the sub bass. Great, so yeah, this is, I mean, overall I think the EQ's sounding pretty nice on this thing, and the multiband dynamics definitely too. Let's listen, one last time without any of the effects. Here's with multiband. Great, so I'm happy with that. So last but not least, it's time to turn on the glue compressor. So the glue compressor is really two different devices in one. By default, your soft clip switch might be off, and this is probably down. The first half of the glue compressor is the kind of actual compressor, which is based on the threshold, and then these three controls. Now, any gain reduction you'll be evoking is going to show metering, and in this case, if I'm going to do anything with the left half of the device, I'll just give it a couple dB of compression, maybe. And generally speaking, in mastering, you want that thing to be pretty fast. I usually don't go all the way fast, but as a starting point, that's a good start. And I'll bring this threshold down just a touch to where I'm just tickling a little bit of the peaks. Honestly, I don't really like too much of that compression, so I'm just doing enough. Honestly, it's going to push down that really little flagrant guy. Let's watch that little meter jump when it hits this little loud part of the signal. This guy right here. It's like pushed it down by like a dB or something. That's fine. Okay, so now let's go to the second half of the device. I'm going to hit this section. Let's bring it in here. For the second half of the device, I'm going to turn on soft clip limiting. Here we go. The soft clip limiter has a little light, and you drive into it with the makeup gain. So what I'm doing now is I'm turning this up until I'm starting to see that light flicker just a tiny bit. And now that I just saw it flicker, I let go. Let's hit play again right where we left off and see that light just barely flicker. So that's where I hit pause and I tab over to the mixer and I take a look at this mixer. Remember, I'm up here at 0, and so and ideally when I'm pushing this makeup gain up, right when I see that flicker is when my peaks are going to be hitting 0. And in fact, you can see this field here is remembering my last peak. The soft clip limiter peaks you off at negative 0.5. So again, if I reset this, turn this down, watch. So we're peaking at negative 5.5. Bring that back. It's usually when you gotta turn your speakers down a little bit because this thing's gonna start to get loud. See right there where I'm hitting 0.5? That's when the soft clip limiter is getting affected. And now I get to decide how much RMS am I gonna finally have, just like I mentioned in the earlier videos today. RMS headroom is how much is your average volume, and so we want to bring the RMS usually somewhere around -4 or -5 for like maximum volume kind of EDM stuff. And if I crank this way up, it's going to be bringing that RMS up super loud. It's also going to be evoking a lot of coloration or distortion from the soft clip circuit. If I have this down low, we'll have greater distance between the peak and the RMS. So you can see when that snare drum claps, it's at like -5. So we're peaking at -5 and our RMS was at like -20. So we have like 15 dB of difference between the RMS and the peak, which is too dynamic. So we're going to go ahead and boost this up to bring the peaks up, and somewhere around 5 or 6 is when we're going to start to hit the soft clip circuit, and we're going to keep going until we see that RMS get up there around -6, -5, somewhere around there. Now my RMS is getting up there around -3, so I'm actually going to turn this down a little bit. Without the glue. With the glue. Trim some more peaks by pulling the threshold down. Now this is going to be a nice loud file. So the EQ for cuts, multi-band dynamics for separating each band and giving them a little bit of upwards or downwards compression or expansion. And then the glue compressor for doing any final trimming of any peaks, plus mostly just boosting into this nice coloration circuit. The soft clip circuit won't let it go in the reds, but anytime you see that little light flickering, we are evoking some distortion. Now, normal mastering engineer is soft clipping the tracks quite a bit, especially in heavier genres like dubstep or anything heavy like that, there's going to be soft clipping, especially on the peaks like the drums and stuff. So that's all handling that right there. So those three are your main devices. Now, if you wanted to get into some really fine tuning of things like the stereo image, especially Like if you're doing acoustic music, it's really common maybe to sneak a little subtle reverb in here after the multiband dynamics and before the soft clip circuit. And then after the reverb, you could even do a little mid-side EQing. Another technique I've seen people do a lot on the note of stereo image is put an EQ8 right here before the glue compressor. Turn all the nodes off, but put it in mid-side mode. And then go to the stereo bands and just cut any unnecessary low-end information. Let's see how much stereo information there is in the sub bass. That's how it should look. Let's get to the drop here. Nice. So there's no stereo image in the bass. If I did see movement and frequency content down here on the stereo bands, I would for sure cut that out of there by just, lopping it off around 80 or 90 hertz, maybe even 100 hertz. I could even put the steep cutoff. That's going to allow me to push this threshold down even further. You also could consider putting a little boost on the highs. I usually say be really cautious about doing too many boosts when you're mastering. It's mostly about cuts. Cool. In this case, if you don't need it, don't use it. I think it's fine. This is our master channel strip. So before moving on, I would shift click on all these. I'd hit Command G. I'd show the header for the rack, and I'd call this IDM master channel. And I'd save that into my library. That way, I'm not going to use the same settings, but at least I'm remembering where I left off last time. And if I decide there's any tweaks I need to make on the track itself, I can do that. And I'll have this as a good jump off point for tossing stuff in there. So bam, there you go. So that's about it for this video, the master channel strip. You can definitely pay people to master your music nowadays pretty cheap, but this is a really great process, and it's really also good for your brain. Next time you go in and you're doing your mix, you'll get a better mix if you've tried to master your tracks yourself too. All right, so onward with analysis of our work and doing a little A/B comparison, this master with our favorite tunes.